This is not about party, this is about representation. And these maps really do cut that in half.
A small group controls the future of Colorado's political map. Do their choices match the best interests of our state?
What this area needs is caring legislators, because this is such a unique, pristine area.
Tonight at 10, Denver7 brings you an in-depth look at potential winners and losers from redistricting, including one historic neighborhood that could be cut in half.
Plus, after 5 straight weeks of hazy skies, Mike Nelson's tracking the chance we could clear the air. And after months of searching, Denver7 helps a Colorado family find a new home.
I appreciate Channel 7 doing this kind of work for people.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Shannon Ogden.
So glad you're with us. I'm Ann Trujillo. First tonight, the promise from the head of CDOT that it will be days and not weeks before I-70 reopens through Glenwood Canyon in some capacity. And that promise backed up in part today because our state received $11 million in emergency funds from the federal government for that rebuilding process. The governor has asked for $116 million for the project. Mudslides, as you know, have kept I-70 closed since July 29th.
And just within the last 20 minutes, Governor Polis announced he will travel to the closure tomorrow morning, and the plan is to announce a full timeline for reopening the highway. We're expecting the governor to start talking at 9 a.m., and we're going to carry that for you live on Denver 7 Plus for your streaming device. Well, CDOT leaders say part of the emergency funding will be used to study I-70 alternatives. Their work will focus on Cottonwood Pass, but some entrepreneurs are dreaming much bigger.
And today, Denver7's Patrick Perez met the next generation of tech talent working on better ways to move us all around.
What may be the future of transportation is getting built right in this room by these CU Boulder students.
Then keep on going. If you're able to build tunnels, you're able to get from A to B much faster.
Meet the CU Hyperloop team, one of just 12 in the entire world competing in Elon Musk's Not a Boring competition.
That competition is to dig a 30-meter long tunnel, half-meter wide, and at least 1.5 meters below the earth as fast as you possibly can.
And these engineers in the making believe their tunnel boring machine can do that.
Right here is going to be where our gearbox is and then the motor connected right to it.
Right now it takes like weeks to drill about a mile. We're hoping that we could get that down to maybe a day to drill a mile and then eventually bring it down to hours.
The team with the winning design and build could eventually help make way for the Boring Company's Hyperloop tunnel infrastructure. It would get you from one place to the next in a fraction of the time. Think Denver to Breckenridge in about 30 minutes.
If we're able to build those tunnels effectively, quickly, and cheaply, then that's going to revolutionize how we do things.
It's a solution we could use right now in Colorado, with mudslides and debris flows closing I-70 in Glenwood Canyon. An underground route could avoid all of that.
If you were able to open up more tunnels along I-70 or, a whole new highway in addition to I-70, that would absolutely speed up transportation.
And as with most Elon Musk projects, the students say when and where this competition is taking place is a secret for now. But they're ready to bring the best of Colorado,
I think we've really thought this through,
onto a worldwide stage that could change how we all get around.
Another pair of hands anywhere?
Patrick Perez, Denver 7.
In Washington, the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure plan is now headed to the House. The Senate gave the bill the green light today, and final approval is still weeks away. The House must vote, and they are currently on August recess.
Barry Morphew's phone records were scrutinized today in a Chaffee County courthouse. Now, Morphew, as you know, is accused of murdering his wife, Suzanne, on Mother's Day of 2020. Prosecutors say his phone pings on May 9th paint a picture of a man who was chasing Suzanne around the house. But his defense, Morphew's defense, say the pings are unrealistic, that he would have to be able to walk through walls for them to be accurate. Testimony in this preliminary hearing will continue in 2 weeks. A judge ultimately will decide if the case will go to trial.
The lines are being drawn. This week, Coloradans are weighing in on the first draft of Colorado's new congressional district maps. Monday, we'll get the official U.S. Census data to help the Redistricting Committee finish the job.
But the first draft is already raising concerns from across the political spectrum. 2 state lawmakers say the preliminary maps split Denver's black community in half. Several members of the Latino community released their own maps this week after concerns their voices will be drowned out at the state capitol. But some independent experts say this process is actually producing a fair result with growing pains.
All right, so let's take this a step further with 360 context. Colorado voters approved an independent redistricting commission. That was 3 years ago. And state leaders promised a fairer process to give us all better representation in Washington.
Well, tonight our 360 coverage focuses on whether the commission's first effort is living up to that promise. Denver7 political reporter Megan Lopez with an in-depth look at the concerns from Colorado's black leadership.
Anywhere you look around 5 Points, there's history.
We are a historical cultural district.
History captured in this museum, but also in the blocks, the buildings, the stories of the people who call this area home.
People help one another. People look out for one another.
Those stories, this history, part of the fabric that make up the culture of this community.
And these are some of our first leaders.
Some moments worth honoring, others a dark mark on Denver, from the KKK to segregation to busing.
Dr. Westbrook right here infiltrated the Ku Klux Klan. They had no idea he was an African-American man.
Through it all, though, this community and its neighbor in North Park Hill have stuck together.
The people who have represented this area, as I can remember from my childhood to this time, have been people who have lived in the neighborhood, who's been a part of the neighborhood.
Every 10 years, though, congressional and legislative maps are redrawn based on census data, a process known as redistricting.
When African Americans hear about redistricting, we automatically get a little bit of anxiety due to gerrymandering.
In the past, it's been up to the legislature and courts to redraw those lines.
Colorado will gain an 8th congressional district.
This time around, a different process altogether. 2 independent commissions made up of 12 people each are responsible for that redistricting.
The big intent really was to make this a less partisan process, but also to introduce competition.
This time, redrawing the lines on that blank map ended up separating 5 Points from North Park Hill.
They cut the African American population in half.
The residents of 5 Points lose that clear voice within the electoral process.
The area is still likely to lean Democrat, but the legislative priorities could change.
That would mean the wishes of the people in the area would be ignored.
The change was so concerning.
Black and brown communities have been divided in a way that we feel is unacceptable.
State Representatives Leslie Herod and Jennifer Bacon wrote an editorial calling for those maps to be completely redrawn.
We currently have around 50 individuals signed up to speak.
At a public hearing in Green Valley Ranch,
I think Denver's been treated like a stepchild.
Those concerns were laid out by some of the community's biggest leaders.
The map that's drawn has no relevance to the black community at all.
The history of Denver is east-west. Your districts have been drawn north-south, so they do not follow communities of interest.
And within that map, a reminder of Denver's dark past.
They drew it along Colorado Boulevard, which, if you don't know the communities, seems to make sense.
History tells a different story of that divide. In the 1930s, Colorado Boulevard was a symbol of redlining.
Areas west of Colorado Boulevard were considered undesirable, and areas east of Colorado Boulevard, like Park Hill, were places where banks invested their loan dollars.
It was, at the same time, the legal isolation of communities of color from white neighborhoods and businesses.
It has taken us decades of work towards erasing these lines.
We didn't know that. We had no idea.
Jessica Shipley from the nonpartisan staff that worked on those maps says that was never the intention.
We would never, ever look at disenfranchising voters. That's just not something nonpartisan staff would ever think to do, honestly.
Still, none of the commissioners redrawing those maps are from this district. Shipley says these maps are just a starting point to spur community discussions.
For me, that was a very successful meeting because I learned something new that I can apply to the next iteration of the maps.
Herod still has her doubts.
You know, I don't know that this is the right process for Colorado.
Others are trying to give the commission a chance.
I am 100% for having an independent commission. They have no skin in the game. They have nothing to gain.
Ultimately, what we're seeing is probably a more balanced approach to redistricting.
The process of redrawing district lines was never expected to be easy or universally accepted, but the people here are hoping commissioners will take a closer look at this divide and others and find a way to keep communities together.
We can do better for our community.
Megan Lopez, Denver7.
All right, so let's bring this conversation back to a simple concept: communities of interest. Colorado's redistricting rules are designed to keep communities of interest in the same district, so their voices don't get scattered and drowned out. Historically, this protected Black and Latino neighborhoods across our state from being split up during this redistricting process. It also opens the door for other groups.
There are lots of potential communities of interest out there. The downfall of communities of interest is that they can be really broad. Just about anybody can argue that they have a community of interest.
Now, Latino leaders are trying to use the Communities of Interest designation to make sure they receive an equal voice. Colorado's Black population was overrepresented in the state legislature in 2019, accounting for about 9% of total seats, but less than 5% of the population. Latinos, on the other hand, were badly underrepresented, making up almost 22% of the state, but earning only about 13% of the seats in the legislature. Now, Claro, one of the largest Latino advocacy groups in the state, released a competing map this week, which they claim does a better job prioritizing communities of color. In a statement, the map architect says, "We drew these maps to center Latino communities of interest. We found that preserving existing communities instead of dividing them drew us into compliance with all the other criteria outlined for the Colorado Redistricting Commission."
And the criticism extends past party lines. State Senator Don Coram, a Republican from Montrose, said the commission was drinking when they drew the preliminary map. He told the Montrose Press, quote, "It's probably not that bad because neither side likes it." Well, we want to hear from you now. What's your opinion on the maps and this whole process? Send us an email, 360@thedenverchannel.com.
Temperatures were really hot again today, but tomorrow even warmer.
Plus, gunshots fired into a little girl's bedroom, seemingly at random.
Yeah, in my daughter's window. How old is your daughter? 6.
Everyone is safe, but tonight neighbors are opening up about a random crime with potentially fatal consequences.
And a woman finally finds a home for her and her son with a little help from Denver7 Gives.
I'm very grateful that I got the help that I needed.